We have our next fireside chat. I'd like to request you to please give our speakers a big round of applause. I'd like to invite them onto the stage, starting with Vishal Gondal, founder and CEO, GOQii. Atul Satija, CEO, Nudge Institute. Monica Shukla, co-founder, Let's Endorse. And chairing this session is Arjun Pratap, CEO and founder, Edge.
Okay, so it's good to be here, good to be physically present in a room, and after 2 years, we're at NASSCOM, so it's great to see faces and connect with people. So my name's Arjun, happy to moderate this power-packed session on people, purpose, and profitability. I think the intersection of this is going to be very interesting to understand from the people on stage, what they think, what their perspective is, and certainly we'll hopefully have time for questions, and we'll be able to field some of them. But to start off, my name is Arjun. I run an HR tech company that matches people to jobs. Our mantra is to connect 1 billion professionals to meaningful jobs. And meaningful means emotionally and economically connecting them, right? So that's one thing that's really brought me here. I'm part of the NASSCOM Product Council. I'm very fortunate to be a part of the governing body, and we see a lot of change that's happening in the economics of how startups are affecting talent. And to talk about this more, we have Monica, who is from IIT Kharagpur, and she runs a fantastic company called Let's Endorse, founded in 2015. And she's going to sort of tell us more about Let's Endorse as we get into conversation with her. And she's also going to give us her perspective in terms of impact and purpose. I think she's talked to me a lot about purpose, so I'm going to see what she tells you about purpose during this conversation. We have Atul here, who's running the Nudge, right? The founder of the Nudge, which is, I think, bang in the impact sector. And he's also the co-founder and CEO of Give India. And I think with two of these powerhouses that he's been doing great work for, and he's going to also help us understand how that great work is coming to help the country become a zero poverty country in our time. Is that it? Right? I was reading about it, and I think that's a crazy mission, but a mission that has a lot of purpose as well. And Vishal is coming from the sort of entrepreneurship side, where he's been a phenomenal entrepreneur who's sold India games to Walt Disney on his second and wonderful startup in the health tech space, GOQii, which I think has a lot of the profit and the purpose intertwined. And I think at that intersection, he's also going to talk about how people manifest into building his company and also serving as his customers. So thank you all for being here, and I think I'm going to just throw it open to asking a question, and this question is going to be about, a company like BlackRock, for instance. They have a $5 trillion fund, and they've sent out a letter to their portfolio companies, CEOs and directors, to socially contribute, to make sure that they're taking care of their investors, their stakeholders, who are also their employees and their customers, but they also want proof that they are contributing effectively to improve society, right? And that's looks like writing on the wall. Is it to be just pasted there, or they're going to monitor and track it? So I'm going to ask you, Vishal, what do you think about statements like that are made? Are they for effect? Are they turning into something that's meaningful in terms of action?
I think, over the last couple of years, especially with COVID, it is clearly proven that there is a huge income divide, and there is a world which has everything, and there is a world which has nothing. And this has led to this very interesting categorization. It's almost called guilt-free luxury. So what they're talking about is that people who have, how can they continue to have whatever they are doing, but somehow integrate social good into this? And I actually saw this trend way back with Tom's, the Tom shoes, which said that every time you buy my pair of shoe, I am donating one to somebody in Africa. And that became a phenomenal brand. And I think that's really what you are now seeing intertwining in literally every business sector, where BlackRock is telling you to donate and be good, and your shampoo company is saying that when you buy the shampoo, there is something good happening behind it. And that's the macro trend. And with GOQii especially, we saw this, and we integrated something called karma points right from the day zero of the product itself, to say that your health journey should not only benefit you, but benefit somebody else. So I think what is happening is, especially the millennials and the people in this generation, they are a lot more social conscious. And previously it was difficult to do this because you didn't know who to donate and who to do what. But now with platforms like Give India, Nudge, it is becoming very, very easy.
So if I had to even go back to the karma points and starting from day zero, and I think if you can just build upon not just having, and your consumers are going to have to identify with the purpose of fitness and well-being. So when you're drawing this out, and obviously you have your stakeholders who are your investors, and your mission to build profit as well while you're at it, how does it sort of deliver to the purpose? Because you have to build this meaningful way of life. So how did the karma points come out, and how do you sort of center on that? Was that just a selling tool, or is it something that people dive into and are recognizing as very valuable when you monitor and track it?
So we are in the business of longevity. That's really what our focus is. How do you live longer and healthier lives? And if you look at any longevity metric or any structure of longevity, and if you study, the blue zones, for example, what's happening in Okinawa and other places, one of the big factors of longevity is people are contributing back to society. So there is a social good, and if you see Ikigai and all these books talking about it, right?
Correct.
So for you to be happy and for you to live longer, it's not about spending money on yourself. Only that much you can do. And even Bill Gates is, donating all the money he has, right? So I think ultimately, the maximum happiness comes from doing things for others. And when we embedded this in our values, our business plan said that the way we are going to retain our users is not by bribing them or giving them something else, but by connecting them to a long-term project of their health and social good at the same time. So actually, it is a very, very important retention and engagement tool for us. So this is part of our business model. It is not something we do on the side. For us, social good is actually a key component of our offering itself.
No, I hear you, and I think I'm seeing it in action across a lot of businesses that have programs intertwined with the cost of the service or the product that you buy that donates. And then it's significant because the world needs help.
But some of them is very cosmetic also, right? I mean, it's just guilt-free. So there is one concept of just saying it's guilt-free. You buy something expensive and something is getting donated. That's just to kill your guilt. But what I'm talking about is seriously engineering this into your product, and which is what we are trying to do.
Agreed. And that's where the ground zero comes in. And if I had to just shift gears and sort of talk about purpose, and Monica, I think you've been drumming purpose into my head. And if you look at how employees are sort of subject to profitability, to the purpose aspect of building a business as well, how do you see it panning out when you're looking at it from a lens where people are at an intersection of profitability and purpose, and they're trying to figure it out? And you can see in the market right now, we're going through signs of recession and weakening of the economy, but we're also seeing a lot of people lay off, employees. And you could attribute it to bad planning, and large companies and small companies are doing it constantly in the recent past. How does purpose factor in this journey? How is it going to be different for employees?
Sure. Firstly, thank you for having me, Arjun. I hope this is working. So, drawing from what Vishal just said, right? When people reach a certain stage of life, that's when the self-actualization bit gets activated and then they try to give back. I honestly believe that that is not the only place where purpose comes from. That's the place of privilege. But then purpose also comes from a place of pain as well as a place of passion, right? So I do feel that, privilege, pain, and passion are the three places, from where purpose come. So now we at Let's Endorse, we work with, we are a social enterprise ourselves, right? So we are very much hooked to the idea of creating shared value where our profits come because we deliver, social good, right? And, so this goes very well with, doing well by doing good kind of ideology, which is very different from a CSR ideology, which is just doing good, right? So at Let's Endorse, talent acquisition, and people management, et cetera, have been, challenges for almost organizations of all different forms and shape. But for a social enterprise in particular, I think that alignment to, the purpose of the organization is the single biggest thing that we look for, right? And that sort of, pervades all through, be it during the hiring process, during retention, during sort of internal mobility, et cetera, right? One of the ways in which social organizations operate is by also checking if people are sort of mission oriented, purpose aligned, and that's where we look for people who can make a trade off for their salary, for an equity in the company, right? So that's very typical of social organizations, from a purpose lens.
If I had to just interject there and I sort of look at the great resignation that was happening because of the way the market was in a hype cycle, right? And there were people who had 7 offers at the minimum. It was tough to hire. This was sort of the mid-2021 journey. And it was insane for companies to be able to go out and really harness talent because it became mercenary, right? So you take that and superimpose the current state of affairs. And where does purpose sort of sit there? I think that's something that you can help us understand.
Right, so I'll go back to this thinking of form follows function, and try to extrapolate it to culture follows purpose, where how you are wired as an individual and what are your sort of asks from life at that particular point in time, right, determine your career choices. Right? If I think that, or for example, if anyone thinks that money matters more at this point in time, then they would definitely trade it off, for a cultural fitment, right? Vis-a-vis, for somebody who wants to join a social enterprise, who's coming in for the primary sort of purpose alignment, they would trade it off for the in-hand compensation and would want to go for a a lesser in-hand and a more ESOP kind of a thing. So I completely get it. People. We still have a hard time hiring. I think talent market is always scarce, particularly from a social enterprise lens. But then, even in that, small subset, we are extremely picky about who we want to go with because, I do understand that, there are a lot of companies who are now getting built for short runs because they want to get acquired and, they want to make big money too fast, too soon. But then, we are in it as if we are running a marathon and, it makes a lot of sense for us to have an A team which sticks around, and, in science, there is this phenomenon of resonance, right? When everything is in sync, then, the amplitude, it magnifies, right? So that's what we are sort of striving to build. Tough, but, that's something which underlines, everything that we do. But this actually stands in contrast with the micro and nano entrepreneurs that we work with. So we have a sort of a program, a Tech and Touch module, which is called Udyamita, through which we turn people who are unemployed and underemployed into micro and nano entrepreneurs by fitting them into different value chains. So in those cases, we have understood that purpose for a conventional business is not that much of a concern, right? For them, the bottom line is bottom line. They want to take away a certain profit every day, for them to feed their families. And, once they grow to become of a certain size, then this entire idea of being eco-friendly, using low-carbon ink, etc., would kick in. But yeah, again, form follows function.
No, absolutely. I take your point on form following function, but back in the day, and I was telling Atul this, that I'd had the good fortune to present to Khosla Ventures, and they were completely for profit in that sense. And I think things have changed based on your recent experience with them, which is formidable because things have to change. Obviously, people get convinced based on what's happening in the environment to be able to contribute better. So in my view, Atul, if you look at it, and we talked about talent mobility, right? And we talk about people at the intersection of purpose and profitability. Where do you see all of this going? And I think you're doing phenomenal work where you're sitting. I think some of the work that you're doing, the people need to know, primarily because it's game-changing. In my head, whatever you told me about what you're doing with Nudge and Give, I think it's just absolutely phenomenal. So kudos to you, but let me just, ask you to speak through the talent mobility piece as you look at your experiences and also run through what the transformation in, say, the Khosla sort of world is.
Yeah. So I'll come to the talent question, but I want to go back to the comment that Vishal made. We ran a small pilot in Bangalore where we went to the pubs in Bangalore and we said if you consume beer, at the end of your bill, you can actually add a certain amount and tip it, so some amount on top. And we did the same thing in cafes. Where do you carry more guilt at the end of the evening, a cafe or a pub? We know the answer. We saw that tipping in pubs was 10x more than tipping in cafes. Because people thought if you're spending $200 on a beer or $500 or 5,000 rupees at the end of the evening, you should tip. But in cafes, when the same person is sitting in the afternoon, they don't feel like tipping. So people want to buy good sleep for themselves based out of the actions that we do during the day. And the same thing is true for corporates also. If you take the idea and zoom it out, right, when you build by taking from the environment, taking from communities, you want to give back more because organizations also feel the way people do. Cities like Jamshedpur are built on philanthropy from the Tata Group because the business that Tata Steel is in needs to consume from environment. And the same thing is true for everything. I think corporates have tried a lot of means to be able to give back. The hygiene is when you force a law like CSR law in India, that is not changing behavior. So rather, it's not changing intent, but it is changing the behavior because of need to be compliant. But there are organizations that are actually going beyond, and we have seen that with the 1% pledge in US, Salesforce, Atlassian, which is a sponsor today, they've taken a 1% pledge where they say 1% of the company's equity, top line, bottom line, or employee volunteer time will go to charity. And that's an organization doing it not because there is a law, just because they feel like they have to give back. A lot of banks, a lot of tech companies are thinking how can they be sustainable on the energy side, waste side, circularity of whatever they are producing side as well. But I feel all of this is not going to solve the fundamental problems that we all face as society, not as economy. We are doing good as an economy. We are doing bad as a society. India is a rich country with 400 million poor people. So if you look at it, we all know the answer that we will have a drone delivery of a salad in your 15-story, 17-story window because you can pay for it, before you'll have a drone delivery of a medicine to a dying mother in tribal villages in Jharkhand. And as a society, we know what is more important. As an economy, we don't look at it that way. So unless businesses solve social problems won't disappear, right? So if you take a jar of glass as a jar of social need, right, market acceleration trickle down will solve some of the social problems, and there are things at the edges that non-profits will solve and things at the bottom that governments and non-profits will solve, and all that is needed. But where I was going with that is that unless talent starts looking at social problems, the energy of amazing top talent actually solving social problems will not be harnessed, and you will actually be living with social problems. So we'll keep enjoying the economy and cribbing over society because we know what we are solving for. Now,
I wanted to say something, but go ahead.
In my journey, we run two nonprofits, Nudge and Give India. Nudge is now a 350, 400 people organization. We work in skill development, rural livelihoods in tribal communities in Jharkhand, in UP. And the quality of talent is the same that I've seen in my past life at Google, in Movi, or other companies.
That's fantastic.
But it has been so difficult to get people to look at nonprofit, social problems. And that's been the most bitter part of this journey. In Give, we run a giving platform. It's a SaaS platform. Last year, we donated 1,250 crores to 3,000 plus nonprofits.
That's fantastic, man. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Very COVID-induced work, and we just finished an acquisition of a for-profit SaaS company as a nonprofit, so that we can actually invest in technology and products to actually create giving solutions, so that every Indian can give very, very conveniently with high trust that their giving is actually creating impact on the other side.
Brilliant. Well done. So, I mean, yeah, you've talked about amazing things, and it's so tough to do this. And guys, I mean, I've been in fundraisers, and he's done it successfully. I think it's just a matter of raising money for the cause, which is so different and not easy to accept, right? Because, you know, if you talk about buying products from green companies, I think regulation drives us into buying products versus it being, that's something that I want to do, right? There's probably 1 out of 100 who does, I want to do this. So when you look at regulation and you look at how it's sort of creating a boundary, and you have karma points on the other end, and you're driving health and well-being as something that's important, I think the purpose part becomes super, super important. How does it affect your employees, Vishal, and when you're driving into, because they have to be goal set also on building profitability into your business, setting revenue targets, going after consumer bases, looking at different markets. And at the constant, I think of it being something that has a purpose to it, right? So how does that connection point happen, and how do you drive it with your workforce?
See, first of all, you can't have a different purpose for your employees, your customers, your investors, and everybody else, right?
Absolutely.
You need to have one purpose.
Absolutely.
In fact, I go to the extent of saying that we have the same pitch we would make to an investor, to an employee, and a customer. It's the same pitch.
Got it.
And when you are working out of the same pitch, then your purpose needs to be that strong, and you need to align everybody. In our case, we took literally the purpose and made that into a brand and also the company. So GOQii is literally be the force. So our idea was that you need to create social change, but also become a force for others and create an impact. So it's like building virality, from a product perspective. I know there are a lot of in NASCOM product guys here. So from a product perspective, purpose actually is the biggest viral loop you can create in your product. And when your customers start believing in the purpose, and that can only happen by authenticity. You can't fake purpose. You can't say something and do something else, because everybody can see through it. Your employees, your customers. So we literally worked on the culture at all levels. We were partners with Oxfam, who used to organize the 100-kilometer trail walk, donating to charity. We took hundreds of our members, users, our employees, our players to the trail walk, and we actually were on the field doing it. So when people see the authenticity, they do believe that yes, we really put money where our mouth is. And finally, just on the science of giving, just kind of briefly telling you about this one chemical, and everybody should research this. It's called serotonin. Serotonin is the ultimate drug anybody can be on. It gives you the biggest high in that sense. And that happens when you do social good, when you donate to charity, or you witness. And if you can integrate serotonin, so dopamine, all these various chemicals. So serotonin actually is super amazing. And if you can somehow integrate the social good into your product architecture, you could actually create a product with more consumers on it, and as well as being good. So it's actually good for business, good for your customers, and good for the community at the same time.
Well, that's fantastic. So serotonin, guys, we got to think about that. But also one of the things is authenticity and transparency. And serotonin in a bottle. I think that's what we'll expect from Vishal.
Serotonin comes in all the drugs.
Yeah. So there you go. So the other thing that I wanted to ask Monica is, you think about what Vishal said, and you talk about employees. And is there an employee-first movement? Because I heard this with HCL way back in the day when they started with the whole employee-first theme. And they said, that's what's going to happen first, and then it's going to be investors, and we're going to think of customers. So I think the whole shift to employees and the workforce is a shift that people have used from an optics standpoint largely, and then it's become driven by, it actually makes sense. What do you think about it?
Once again, it totally depends on at which stage and of, what format of the organization is to be able to, claim something like that, right? For a small business, it doesn't matter.
So you can't have employees first
honestly,
in a small
business. Honestly, it
business?
doesn't matter. For a really small business, we work with kirana stores and printing stores. It doesn't matter, their employee churn is like, aaj aaya, kal aaya, and like that, right? But needless to say, I mean, people, for organizations like ours, for startups, even for large corporates, employees are central, to everything that goes around. One of the things that I would want to pick from Vishal's point is, purpose as it is being translated every day and being demonstrated, right, by the senior leaders. I think very few people would recollect that purpose every morning when they get up, and come to office, but then trying to distill that purpose statement to what it means for them, right, and trying to make them understand, while the larger purpose is this, but on a day-to-day basis, this is how they are progressing towards it, and this is how this movement, this progress is leading to their own individual growth and their upskilling is what is most important, which is a mistake that sometimes we do at the organization. We assume that once we have laid out the purpose and we keep iterating, we keep demonstrating, people would sort of keep understanding, and that would keep them going. But unless you distill it at a role, at a function level, it's not going to work, right? But then I also sort of agree that the latest trends and movements around employee centricity, I think much of it is branding stuff, what we see on LinkedIn. There is some truth to it. Like I know Vishal and me were talking about the Zerodha guys, right? And how, they have embedded fitness as a core value for their employees, right? But then, there have been attempts to overdo stuff like that, which I think dies down after a point in time. It's not sustainable.
No, I hear you, and I think a lot of times we obviously see it as optics. It's great branding, but I think a lot of people see through it now, and I also think it's also by virtue of the fact that you have the gig economy, the gig workforce, the Gen Z, the millennial, who are a lot more discerning, who are exposed to instant gratification and real terms. So when you look at that and you look at how the new workforce, the nature of work has shifted, and we sort of see talent mobility, and I see a lot of the employee internal mobilization happening very rapidly, and technology helping it through its various guises. I think there's a sea change there. People aren't going to cop the branding equivalent of it, and I don't see that going too far, even in the current stage, even if enterprises are trying to bang it into shape. But I think from the way the gig workforce is, and I take your point, Atul, that it's tough to get people to work, and if you have to find meaningful ways to get the right talent, especially in what you're trying to do, right? And again, I say it's crazy for me to even imagine being in your shoes, but I think you've done a great job. Look at the transition. You've been in Google, you've been in Mobi, you've been building, a $0 to $100 million business in China as well. And then you go into this world where you're going to people and you're trying to raise money and then start deploying it effectively. Do people see that sort of shift in the intersection between profitability and what it means in that world to it being something that just being used judiciously, hence I'm going to deploy capital, and what is that shift? And it's limited, right? The amount of funds that can actually come in there versus the for-profit world of private equity and venture capital.
Yeah. I think we have seen that there are two distinct buckets of money that non-profits deploy. When you look at retail donors, right, when you see a campaign, when you see a story, when you see somebody in need and you help, we've seen that while we want impact to happen, most retail donors are looking for relatively instant gratification, right? You feel good when you help someone. Back to Vishal's example of how sort of the hormonal changes in us make us feel good. Retail donors are looking for that, and what they care about is if I give $100, please tell me that the entire $100 went to the person who was needing it, And it was spent exactly for what you said you will spend on. They don't ask a question saying that somebody was hungry, you gave a meal. Was the meal nutritious? What will happen tomorrow to the same person, etc., etc. Institutional donors, on the other hand, do care about long-term impact because they're deploying larger capital, mid-term capital. So like in corporates, right? I mean, the structure is input, activities, output, outcome, and impact. Most of the retail donors will care about the output of the money they're giving. Institutional donors will look at outcomes and the eventual impact of it. So we've seen both kinds of
No, absolutely, and
segments.
Sort of small example of people really caring and sort of moving the needle. I think there's one facet where a lot of us are reached out to for donations individually in our capacities to help multiple organizations, orphanages, animal care, and so many different things, right? And I think the world, and we talk about sustainability, is the environment in all its forms, right? And a recent example is when I was looking at it, I like animals and I've been trying to do my bit. I always look one up to how I can maximize the amount of inflow there. And you go to a foundation. Can you reach to a foundation versus you being that individual, spending 1,500 rupees a month, right? And I think in effect what I found, and I went to the Premji Foundation, and I found and approached Rishad Premji for it, and I found that the follow-up was amazing from him, right? Which is, get that mail across to me, which you had cited, was the first follow-up within a day's time. So I think people are really concerned, and this is very important as a mission where philanthropy, again, and this is generally for everybody, I think I'm learning through the lens of people who are really making a difference, right? It's not about the quantum, it's about the effect of doing it. And it's very different from the lens of where we used to sit in the past, where we weren't moving and we were very material and inward looking, right? I think the world has changed dramatically because look at what we are going through in terms of the environmental impact, even in a city like Bangalore, right? You've had 1/4 of it flooded and a deluge there. But I think we're all changing, and I think the intersection has been people as an element between profit and purpose. So thank you all for listening in. Unfortunately, our time's up, and we don't have time for questions, but we certainly thank you, Monica, Atul, and Vishal for participating in this capacity and talking about something that's close to your heart, bringing your lens into materially understanding what this intersection is all about. So thank you, guys.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big round of applause. I'd like to request Arjun to present Monica, Atul, and Vishal with a small token of our appreciation. Once again, we'd like to thank Wealth, our gifting partners. And Arjun, I've got a small token of our appreciation going out to you as well, if you could just accept that. Thank you so much for moderating that session.